This is lecture 20 and we were discussing propagation of deflagration. So, propagation of a flame in a premixed medium. So, fuel and air are mixed and then you have this flame which is propagating through it. So, we discussed that to some extent yesterday and we also defined a burning velocity quantity. So, a transformation velocity or burning velocity was written in terms of a spatial speed of the flame and the speed of the gas immediately ahead of the flame. So, we wrote that yesterday, and apart from that we also said that burning velocity is actually the velocity of the unburned gas, velocity with which the unburned gas moves into the flame relative to the flame and normal to the flame. But most importantly, I think yesterday we also discussed how a flame propagates, and through discussion we could understand that if you have a fuel air mixture and if a flame is propagating, then it is not a particular set of material particles which are moving. It is not a movement of like a rigid body or something, it is not a movement of a membrane either, but what the flame is doing is ahead of the flame in this zone there is a fuel air mixture, and in this fuel air mixture the flame manages to pump in heat and also some active radicals, because at the flame at the red zone that you see the temperature is really high and there are a lot of active chemical species. So, by means of diffusion primarily they will go to the zone which is immediately ahead of it. So, the blue zone which you see at this point of time will get converted to a red zone, that means it will become a flame, and then that will heat and supply radicals to the zone which is immediately ahead of that, and that is how a flame propagates. Now, one of the things that we understand here is that the rate at which the flame propagates, the rate at which the flame eats through the mixture is going to be important for us, because that is related to the rate of consumption of the mixture. And rate of consumption of the mixture, which is in terms of mass flux, okay, if we write m dot only, then it is rho u times SL actually. Okay. Again, if you want you can write an m dot double prime to show that this is the flux. So, we can see the flux of consumption of the mixture depends on a burning velocity. It depends on the unburnt mixture density, it also depends on the burning velocity. Now, how important is that? If you have an engine, okay, it is not laminar anymore, but still we can think about this flame propagation. So, the flame goes from position 1 to position 2 to position 3 like that. The piston is somewhere over here, piston of course is also moving, but the flame is moving, and as the flame moves it consumes mixture. So, the rate of consumption of mixture is important for the engine, because the rate at which it will consume the mixture is directly related to the rate at which it will produce the hot gases. It is related directly to the rate at which heat will get generated, the rate at which chemical energy of the fuel will get released in the form of heat, in the form of thermal energy, right. So, the rate of consumption of the mixture is important, and of course, that relates to burning velocity, we understand that to some extent. So, to know something about the burning velocity is going to be very important for us, because in all sorts of practical devices obviously you would like to know how fast the flame moves and how fast it is able to consume the mixture. So, later on in the next couple of lectures maybe we will start understanding and developing relations, developing expressions for calculation of burning velocity, because this is such an important thing for us. But before that, today we will have a discussion which is more phenomenological. So, what I plan to do today is to show you some videos and show you some videos of actual experiments, from which we will get an idea of what sort of things these flames can do. Okay. We had done that once previously in the semester. I had shown you a couple of videos. Remember this candle flame, you put off that candle flame and then the wax vapor goes up, and then you reignite it, and you could see in slow motion videos the flame coming back and getting re-established on the wick, things like that. So, there are two purposes of showing you these videos. One purpose is that for the premixed flame discussion that we are going to have in the next few lectures, this will visually tell you something. Some of these videos will tell you something. But apart from premix flames, I will also show you some other flame situations like diffusion flame, for example, which we can utilize later. Again, we will not be able to interpret and understand every single thing that you see in the videos, but if you remember broad features of this, we can come back to these, come back to your observations sometime later in the semester. Now, the first video that I am going to show you has been developed by Indian Institute of Science, and they have a lab called CGPL, which is Combustion Gasification and Propulsion Lab. So, they developed this video, I think this is 7 or 8 minutes long. It starts off with premix flame, but then it shows some other flames and fire situations also. And I might interrupt and then ask you some questions or clarify a few points. So, it might take me longer than 8 minutes to run the video. So, let us see this one first.
Understanding combustion through images. You will see several illustrative films on gas, liquid and solid combustion processes. Flames that arise from an initial premixing of fuel and gas are called premix flames. Flames where mixing occurs at the flame are called diffusion flames. And combustion acoustics is due to the coupling between heat released by combustion and acoustic waves generated in the medium. About 70% of the videos are from experiments conducted in the laboratory, rest is from public domain. This means a one-sided open tube with an arrangement of filling a tube with a gaseous mixture of known composition and sparking at the top. Note that the stoichiometric flames are faster than lean or diffusions. These mixtures have actually similar structures. The flame speed is representative of the reactivity of a fuel in mixture. The steady combustion of the flow.
Alright, so one of the things that we noticed is that the flame is not planar. Did you see a flat planar flame moving? So, that is what I have been telling you, but me telling you is not sufficient. If you actually see it in a video, it is much better for you. You see that it is not planar, it is in fact curved. And the other observation which he specifically, the narrator specifically mentions, is that the stoichiometric flame moves the fastest. Okay. We do not know this so far, because we have not done this analysis for burning velocity, we do not understand this fully, but I think you probably could have guessed this, is not it? A stoichiometric flame is likely to give, since it is at the correct ratio of fuel and air, is likely to give you higher temperatures and higher reaction rates and things like that. Okay. We did the adiabatic flame temperature calculation for equilibrium composition for a stoichiometric mixture, and we found that that is the highest. So, for propane air you had done that, you had got the adiabatic flame temperature as a function of equivalence ratio, and it was maximum at an equivalence ratio which is slightly higher than stoichiometric. So, in some sense intuitively you understand that stoichiometric flame is the strongest. So, what you saw in that part of the video is, I will play this again because nice thing to see. So, this is the flame tube experiment, and
This means a one-sided open tube with an arrangement of filling a tube with a gaseous mixture of known composition and sparking at the top. Note that the stoichiometric flames are faster than lean or diffusions. These mixtures have actually similar structures.
yeah, so he has even given values. So, if you watch this video at your hostel room, and if you play frame by frame, then you will be able to write down these values, and these will serve as references for you. So, the propagation speed for a stoichiometric mixture is 0.6 meters per second, for lean mixture is 0.39, for rich mixture is 0.34. The stoichiometric is propagating the fastest, and there is some color difference also between the rich flame and the lean flame, and the rich flame also has a cellular structure. He mentions that. He mentions that it has a cellular structure. Did you hear that? Yeah, I don't know exactly where to start, but okay, let's start again here.
Say one-sided open tube with an arrangement of filling a tube with a gaseous mixture of known composition and sparking at the top. Note that the short-term flames are faster than lean or rich mixtures. Rich mixtures have
Yeah, so the rich one, which is at the bottom, has kind of like cells. Difficult to understand from this video, but you could see a different kind of structure for cellular flame, for rich flames. So that's called a cellular structure. We will not be able to understand and discuss this in this particular course. It's just it's a result of some instability. Okay. Anyway, so we understand the stoichiometric is the fastest. We understand something about the setup also. Again, you can look at it later in when you I'll give you the video. You can look at it in detail, and you can see what the arrangement is like. Yeah.
Flame colors are actually different, but something has been done just for visualization.
No, flame color is different because the active species that you get, these are kind of different in lean flames and stoichiometric flames and rich flames. So nothing has been done. So the question was, has something been done to change the color of the flame? Nothing. Okay. So the bluish green color that you see for the rich mixture is more for excited, more it's the radiation coming from C2 radicals, excited C2 radicals. Okay, C2 something, 2 carbon atoms. So it tells you that color also depends on what is coming out, what kind of mixture that you have. It tells you that the speeds are different. The lean is going, looks like the lean is going a little faster than the rich, and the stoichiometry is significantly higher. Okay, so after this he shows the Bunsen flame.
flame speed is representative of the reactivity of the fuel air mixture. The steady combustion of the flow of premixed mixture through a Bunsen burner shows a flame that becomes more intensely turbulent when it joins the steam. It actually blows off there. It's lift and then blow. Steady combustion, flashback and blow off, when the flow of premixed gases is decreased slowly through tubes of different diameters. The flame blows off in the smallest diameter tubes since the quench distance.
Yeah, I stopped this so that you can read this and understand this better. From left to right, you can see smaller diameter tubes, and then you have larger diameter tubes. Okay, and you are sending a fuel air mixture through all these tubes. So the flame blows off in the smallest diameter tubes since the quench distance of the mixture. Now, quench distance is actually, you don't still know much about the quench distance, and in the other okay, so if we exclude the smallest diameter tube, if you look at the other diameter tubes, you actually see the flame traveling back. Okay, so for a moment, let's not think about the smallest diameter tube. You can see that if you look at the largest diameter tube, can you see the flame already coming in? Yes, and even in the other ones, because this darkish thing, and you can see, if you look closely, you will be able to see a little bit of flame just beginning to move in. Okay. So flames can flash back. So these are premixed flames. Inside the tube, these are now transparent tubes, and inside the tubes you have this mixture of fuel and air, and under certain conditions the flame can travel back. So under what conditions, that we still have to understand. So this tells you that if you have a tube and if you send a fuel air mixture through it, and you ignite it, you may not be able to stabilize the flame on the burner, so that the flame might come in, okay, might flash back, and it might even blow off in some situations.
So why the length of these tubes isn't kept different?
Because the larger length, maybe the larger diameter tube, you will be able to see for longer duration of time the flame traveling back. Okay. So, if we play this, then let us see how far it goes in each case. All right. So, in the largest diameter tube, what did you see? The flame could go all the way down, isn't it? The velocity of the movement or the speed of the movement of the flame. And the second one, the second largest diameter tube, it could still go far. In the third one, it did not go that far, correct. So, that is why there is a different heights. So, in the third one, for example, it in fact got extinguished somewhere in the middle, correct. So, let us play it again so that we understand this.
Steady combustion, flashback and blow off, when the flow of previous gases is decreased slowly through tubes of different diameters. The flame blows off in the smallest diameter tubes since the quench distance of the mixture is comparable to the diameter of the tube. It flashes back in the other 3 tubes.
Yeah, so in the third one, it seemed like it became very weak midway through the tube, correct. So, there must be something happening to this flame. In all these cases, the flame is traveling back, but out of the first 3, in the third one, it seemed to get very weak when it had reached roughly the middle of the tube. Okay. So, something must be happening with the diameter. Any guesses?
So maybe proper air fuel mixing might have not been there below the half length of the tube.
Actually, we cannot assume that, because the point is that initially we sent fuel air mixture through all these tubes, and then ignited, we all got flames, and then the flow rate was reduced, and then we saw that the flame was coming back. That is what is happening. We can't assume without any reason that the flame has actually, the fuel air mixture is not properly mixed. We cannot assume that. You see, in a shorter diameter tube, what might be happening to the flame? What does a shorter diameter tube do to the flame? Does it become more difficult for the flame to move through a smaller diameter tube? Just intuitively. Is it more comfortable for the flame to travel down through a larger diameter tube than a shorter diameter tube? In a shorter diameter tube, maybe there is more surface area contact with the flame, correct. So, for a particular,
More in larger diameter.
no, per unit volume of the flame, yeah. So, wouldn't there be more surface area in the shorter diameter tube, smaller diameter tube? So, is that doing something to the flame? If it is, yeah, so the response is heat transfer. So, isn't it likely that there is more heat transfer if you have a smaller diameter tube? So, what will heat transfer do to the flame?
lower the temperature.
Yeah, lower the temperature, make the flame weak, reduce the rates of reaction. So maybe that is what is happening. All right, so this we understood without doing the theory. Okay, so this is the purpose of showing you the videos. Sometimes we have to do this. So I'll proceed with playing the rest of it.
At the same power level, the premix flame volume is about half of a diffusion flame, and hence the heat release rate of a premix flame is higher accordingly. Premix flames have a higher heat release rate because fuel and oxygen are initially well mixed.
Okay, again for this one I will give you the video and you can write these numbers down then and try to think about it. This tells you clearly that for a diffusion flame, there is a non-premix flame, there is a much larger flame volume, because the fuel and air are not mixed at all, they are really not mixed before combustion. So it takes a larger volume for the fuel stream to get fully burnt. Okay, so that is why you see a tall diffusion flame here, roughly the same diameter of the nozzle for the diffusion flame and for the premix flame, but the diffusion flame is taller, so there is larger volume. So it is 16.4 centimeter cubed, for the premix flame is 8.4 cubic centimeter, and accordingly the heat release rate is roughly double. Heat release rate is actually in this example exactly double for the premix flames. Okay. So these are good observations to remember. We of course we cannot really check this very thoroughly at this point of time, but it is good to remember this.
How comes it that power of both has changed something?
Power of both are same because you are sending the same mass flow rate of fuel. So the power is calculated as the m dot of fuel multiplied by the calorific value. So that has been in for these two burners, the same m dot f is being sent. Okay, you can send the same m dot f. You have two nozzles, one for a premix flame, one for the diffusion flame. You send the same value of m dot f. So the theoretical power can be kept the same. Okay. So for this one, for the last one, our approach will be we just note this down and then we can think about it later. All right. So I think I just hope you are able to remember some of these features, because I will refer to them later, and I will also going to show you little bit, not an entire video, but little bit about another experiment with the movement of flame in a tube. Now that is done at I think University of Southern California, and this is a picture of the setup that they have. So there is a tube, and the tube has the tube is transparent. It is you can see that on one side, on this side here, on this side there is a tube going in. So it is bringing in the premix reactants, and the reactants are entering through this and flowing. Actually, it is not stationary reactant. Reactants are flowing into the tube, and it is ignited on this side. There is a hot ceramic surface which results in ignition of the mixture. So they are flowing from this side and they are getting ignited on this side. Okay. And then there are propagation of flames. I am showing you this just to give an idea of what kind of experiments sometimes people do. So they have photosensors at different places, as you can see, and they also have thermocouples at different places. So when a flame moves, the photosensors will pick up radiation from this, and it will tell you when the flame is passing by the photosensors, and the thermocouples will give you local temperatures. So you can record all this with the help of a data acquisition system, and you can know where the flame is and what the temperatures are at different places. So, the purpose of this kind of an experiment will be to first of all see what are the speeds of these flames for various equivalence ratios. You are sending premixed reactants from this side, from the left hand side, and the premixed reactants equivalence ratio is in your hands. You are sending a certain amount of fuel, you are sending a certain amount of air. So, you can adjust the equivalence ratio, and once you adjust the equivalence ratio, for each of those equivalence ratios you can ignite and see how fast the flame moves. So, this is similar to the IISc video that we saw, but this gives you some understanding of how this experiment can be done. This tube is also horizontal. The IISc tube, flame tube that we saw was vertical. Okay, so this is a video from this University of Southern California, I think, from their experiments, and I will not play this fully, I will play it for a little while. Okay, actually he does other things also. He just shown us the experiment for lean mixture, but he also shows for stoichiometric mixture and for rich mixture. and this is not really very new, very different from what the IAC experiments are. But one thing he mentions is good for you to understand is that the flame is also accelerating. So, that the IAC narrator did not say much about the flame acceleration part, because it was not accelerating so much. Here you see there is first laminar, then it becomes turbulent, and then it accelerates. So, again this tells us that the assumption that we made, that it is steady and it is not accelerating, it is constant area, much of that really does not work. Those assumptions work in a limited sense. Okay, it is not flat, it is not 1D, and it is not steady, because it is accelerating. Okay. Now, what we will do is we will go back to
Is this the accelerating phenomenon similar to like the thing that we discussed yesterday, that if one end is closed then
yeah. So, that is the question here is about this acceleration. So, the question that I hear is whether this is similar to the deflagration to detonation transition. Well, it is only similar in the sense that there is an acceleration. Okay. But here you can see that the ignition was done at the open end. Ignition was done at the open end. On the left hand side the reactants were entering, on the right hand side you had the igniter, but it was open. Okay. Remember the photo that we had, remember the last video that we have seen, left hand side the reactants were entering through a T junction, and the right hand side was open, and right hand side only had the igniter. So, if we ignite it there, it is unlikely that it will become a detonation. So, it will remain a deflagration, that means it will remain a flame, but it can become turbulent from an initial laminar flame. That is what was happening. So, these are not exactly the same things. Okay. Deflagration to detonation transition is something which we have not discussed at all, and I just mentioned it, isn't it. So, we will not be able to draw a parallel with that with the limited background that we have now.
Sir, speed also depends upon the rate at which the mixture is entering, or
yes, yes. So, the mixture was being fed from the left hand side. Okay. Mixture was being fed from the left hand side, and the ignition was being done on the right hand side. So, the speed at which the flame propagated of course depended on the speed at which you fed the mixture. So, that is a very good question in fact. Okay. In fact, there are certain situations when if you do it well, if you send the mixture at an appropriate rate, you will may be able to even hold the flame almost at the same place. Okay. So, in fact, in this video which we have not seen totally, he does talk about it, but I think we will lose too much time if we see the entire video. We will lose about 5 or 6 minutes. So, now I want to go back to some theory, some understanding of flame propagation. So, this is from Stephen Turns' book, and this shows you a laminar flame structure. So, imagine again that flame, ahead of it is the unburnt mixture, behind that is the burnt mixture. So, the flame at atmospheric pressures for typical hydrocarbon air situations is of the order of a millimeter. The thickness is of the order of a millimeter. Okay. Now, that thickness can be thought of as more like a preheat zone and a reaction zone. Preheat zone is not exactly part of the reaction zone. There is not much reaction happening here, but you can see that we have here this plot, the one that I am tracing. This is the volumetric heat release rate. So, this is where the reaction is actually happening. Okay, so, this is a profile. So, what are these? What is peak? This gives you certain values. So, at this axial distance, this is axial distance. So, what have we plotted? We have plotted temperature as a function of the axial distance, the volumetric heat release as a function of the axial distance, and also the reactant mole fraction as a function of axial distance. Where is that axial distance? Axial distance is along the length of the tube. If you imagine the tube in which you have that mixture, right. So, axial distance will be along that length of the tube. So, you can see that there is a zone where there is a sharp reaction taking place, and that is where the maximum heat release is taking place. Lot of reaction, correct. Lot of reaction means lot of volumetric heat release also. If the reaction rate is high, then there there is a lot of heat release also. And what about temperature? Temperature in the preheat zone is small, but it increases throughout the preheat zone, and then in the reaction zone it keeps on increasing, and that becomes more stable towards the latter part of the reaction zone. Now, the reaction zone can be thought of as having two parts. One is that this is a fast reaction zone, and then there is also a slow reaction zone here. Fast reaction zone is actually what typically we can think of as a main flame zone. So, there fuel and oxidizer are reacting with each other mainly through bimolecular reactions, very vigorous rapid reactions. Now, towards the latter part, in this part, you see that the temperature is increasing slowly. You see that the reaction rate is in fact is coming down, it is not that high anymore. So, in this region primarily you have termolecular reactions. So, chain is getting terminated. Remember we discussed chain initiation, chain propagation, chain branching, chain termination. So, the more of the chain termination termolecular reactions happen in the slow reaction zone, correct. The CO oxidation reaction, which is the main CO oxidation reaction, is CO plus OH giving you CO2 plus H, right. So, that also happens in the slower part of the reaction zone. Do we understand the temperature profile? Of course, it is not very hard to understand this. So, this is low temperature here. So, this is more like the unburnt side, isn't it? This part where my pen is, this is more like the unburnt part. So, the temperatures are low, but the flame is able to push heat, right. How is it being able to do that? Because it has got high temperature here, it has got low temperature here. So, there is a huge temperature gradient. You know Fourier's law, isn't it? So, temperature gradient will give you a lot of heat flux, very large values of heat flux, and this temperature gradient is very large, isn't it? What is this temperature like? 2000 Kelvin. Now, this is more like 300. If you are talking about 300 Kelvin unburnt temperature, then this is more like 300, this is more like 2000, and it is going from 300 to 2000 over a distance which is probably even less than a millimeter. So, what is the temperature gradient like? Huge. So, that huge temperature gradient will, imagine an arrow. So, that pushes heat from this high temperature zone to the preheat zone. That is why the preheat zone gets heated. So, we understand the temperature profile. It is increasing slowly here because there is more termolecular reaction. The most vigorous reactions are not there anymore. Most of the heat has been released here. Over here in this region, it approaches the equilibrium adiabatic flame temperature. It may not reach it exactly, but it approaches some sort of a value. So, there is a slow increase like this. Now, this chi r, chi is for mole fraction. So, chi r is the mole fraction of the reactants, and here Turns is plotting just a reactant mole fraction, but we do not have one reactant, we have more than one reactant. We have fuel, we have oxidizer, but in a general sense he just wants to tell us that the reactant mole fraction goes from a large enough value and it drops in the main flame region. It actually becomes almost 0. Okay, it becomes 0 over here where the peak of the heat release also is. So, a lot of reaction taking place consuming reactants, hardly any reactant on this side. So, all got consumed. Okay. So, that is our flame structure. Now, if you keep this picture in mind, this will help you understand how flame propagates. It transfers that heat, thereby generating heat in the preheat zone. What you see is the preheat zone will at the next instant become the reaction zone, correct. What this does not show is that the active species which are formed in the flame region in the reaction zone, a lot of very active radicals, they also will tend to diffuse towards the preheat zone and thereby help the preheat zone also get ignited. So, this is one important picture that you can keep in mind. Now, I will also go back to this flame tube schematic that I had drawn at the beginning of the class. So, here it was moving like this, here we got a propagating flame, isn't it? So, this flame has a spatial speed, right. We were talking about spatial speed yesterday, we called it SS. This flame has a spatial speed, but we understand that there can be other kinds of flames like a Bunsen flame where there is no spatial speed, the flame is actually stuck at one place. So, in a Bunsen burner, again this is from Turns's book, but I had drawn a similar picture some time back, beginning of the semester. So, you can see that the fuel is coming in, air is coming in, there is this hole, and you get essentially two flames. There is an inner cone which is a premixed flame, and what does not burn in that inner cone, for example carbon monoxide or hydrogen, they will go and burn in the outer cone which is more of a non premixed flame. Okay. So, what unburnt from the first cone is a premixed cone because fuel and air are already mixed. What is not burnt there, that will go and burn in the presence of air coming from outside, the atmospheric air. So, wherever the Bunsen flame is, your chemistry lab or wherever, that air will come from here, and the unburnt from the first one, from the first flame will meet that air, and then you will get this flame, you got this outer cone which is the diffusion flame. And what I also have here is this picture. Now, this tells you that the unburnt mixture moves with a velocity Vu towards the inner flame cone. So, this is now the inner flame cone, it moves towards that, and it has got two components, it has got a normal component and it has got a tangential component, right. So, the normal component will be the same as the burning velocity, okay, because we said that the burning velocity is actually the velocity with which the unburnt mixture moves into the flame, normal to the flame and relative to the flame. So, it should be VUN, which is equal to SL, which is laminar burning velocity. Okay. We are assuming that this is a laminar flame. So, what is an expression for then for SL based on what you see here? What is VUN? VU sin alpha. Okay. You can see that. What is alpha? Alpha is the half cone angle of the inner cone. So, if you can measure alpha in a lab experiment, and some of you may have already done that in some other course, in an experimental methods course. So, if you have this alpha, then VU sin alpha is actually the burning velocity. So, this is one way of determining the burning velocity of a mixture. So, this is an example of a stabilized premixed flame. Just a few minutes back we have seen a flame tube where the flame was a propagating flame. So, we will close today actually by going to a Bunsen flame video. Most of this you know already, but
today is the 200th birthday of the famous German chemist Robert Bunsen, or Bunsen as he's called in English. And he, of course, is really famous for the Bunsen burner. And we've used it on quite a lot of our videos, never really looked at it. So
Yeah, so the color, we were discussing color, and the yellow color which you see in the candle flame, I think I probably told you that this is because of soot. So, if there are carbon particles get produced in the flame, carbon particles are not there in the fuel, fuel is a gaseous fuel. Okay. In case of a candle also, the carbon particles are not the wax particles, right. Carbon particles are getting produced in the flame. When the wax melts and then vaporizes and then burns on its way towards the flame, something happens, the fuel molecules break down and then there is nucleation of soot particles, which are carbon particles. Soot particles are typically mostly carbon, there is a little bit of hydrogen. Okay. But this carbon will emit radiation in more in the continuum black body kind of range. Okay. So, you get this orange, bright yellow orange kind of glow. So, he is talking about that, and he is using just fuel so far. Okay.
And so the combustion of the gas, the burning of the gas, is not really very efficient, and some of the carbon is being wasted. The natural gas that comes out of here is largely methane, CH4, and so some of it is not burning properly. It's bright yellow because the tiny particles of carbon are so hot that they glow in bright orange. The exciting thing happens when you turn the piece of metal and open the little window below. And this Bunsen burner was invented by Bunsen and his lab assistant, though most people have forgotten the name of the lab assistant now. What is the lab assistant's name? I can't remember either. As I turn this, we mix the air much more efficiently with the methane, and so it burns really well. Scientists were really excited.
So, this is the reason I am showing you this video, that first there is only fuel, then you add air and then you see the color change, you see the flame change, and did you just see that there is an inner cone which got formed. Okay. So, we will do that again.
People have forgotten the name of the lab assistant now. What is the lab assistant's name? I can't remember either. As I turn this, we mix the air much more efficiently with the methane, and so it burns really well. Scientists were really excited about the behavior of this. And one of the things that Bunsen is famous for is looking at the light that was emitted from flames. In fact, he used this burner to discover the elements rubidium and cesium, but from the light that they emitted. The rubidium and cesium were in small amounts in mineral water from some German spa. He discovered them using his burner. One of the things people use this hot flame for is for blowing glass. My hand shakes too much for being a very good glass blower, but the idea is that you rotate a piece of glass in the hottest possible part of the flame, which is the tip of this blue cone, and you can see the orange color of the sodium being evaporated off the glass, and the glass goes all soggy, you can see here. And when it's really hot and soft and beginning to glow quite red, you can then pull the glass out into a fine capillary tube. This was the first sort of burner, the first type of burner, where you could really control the size of the flame. And you could make it in different sizes. They have
All right, so part of it was just pure entertainment, but it's also important to remember that if you are doing a combustion experiment, then you need to know where the fire extinguisher is. But for the last video, we saw at least the construction of the Bunsen flame, which also you should check yourself in the lab. And you also saw that okay, if there is no air, then it's the first flame that he set up was a pure non-premixed flame, diffusion flame. So it was tall. Did you see that it was tall and yellow because of soot? And when he introduced air, the flame length reduced. Then you got two flames, the inner cone and the outer cone, and the flame became blue. So the flame wasn't producing soot. Okay, the flame wasn't producing soot, and the flame height has come down. Now you can relate it to the first video that we had seen today, that the volume of a diffusion flame for the same flow rate of mass of fuel, I assume that he didn't change the mass of fuel, he just increased the air flow rate. Okay. So the volume of the diffusion flame was much larger, isn't it, in the first video that we saw, for the same firing rate, so for the same power, for the same m dot f, right. So you could see a demonstration of that here, because he set up a non-premixed flame and then converted to a premixed flame. Okay, so this was today's class was more about just experiencing, at least on video, what different flame phenomena we are going to study in the next few lectures. In the next class, we will start some theory on how to calculate the rate of propagation of a flame in a premixed mixture. So, we will stop here. Thank you.